Chapter 2, More Better Day.
Colonel Davis took command of the frontline grill that the welders had thrown together. As he flipped one of the beefsteaks with channel lock pliers, he called out,
"This one is ready."
He had lived the hard surface life for a long time. Among the useful tricks he had picked up was a polished talent for grilling. Like everyone else in the East Airport hangar building, he was in a celebratory mood. His group would stay overnight, both to work on the new vehicles that George and his people had brought home, and they also needed to meet Fleet Admiral Rudel when he arrived with his plane in the morning. Jim had taken the airbase's unexpected underground survivors with him back to the city. They had departed aboard the transport truck and then took the light rail train to Smuggler's Passage Depot. Enough of Hiram's original morning crew remained behind that they would make good use of the side of beef that Critias and Blue had provided for them. Vern had taken the rest of his heavy cargo of hunted beef carcasses back to the city and then returned to park the Black Hole in its spacious new hangar out on the airbase. Once the airship was safe from wind and storm, Vern came to stay with them at the East Airport garage. Vern would be available to pilot the airship again in the morning when they took Fleet Admiral Rudil to see King Louis. It was Jim's hope that Colonel Davis, his people, and the ride aboard the Black Hole would impress Rudil that they were a respectable operation, even by the standards of a fleet admiral. The Starlight Squad accepted some beefsteaks to go along with the extravagant dinner that Jim had provided them. Their basket contained boiled lobster, canned fruit, and bottled beer, along with some chocolate for dessert. All of it was in generous portions. The squad knew that the reward was due to Yeti when he rescued the foragers from that pirate. He had saved the rest of his squad, too, at the same time. It was true that they had done extra duty by being there at all, but it was Yeti's decisive intervention during a crisis moment that had earned them all such an amazing feast. Jim was so grateful because he had nearly lost an entire crew of his most valuable field operations people. The basket proved it. With all the great food in the place, none could doubt that dangerous forager work measured success in its degrees of deliciousness. Critias had finished his work late and still cleaned his mech suit. Its hydrophobic properties shed the cattle blood readily enough, but it still required regular internal cleaning and basic maintenance. He had been up and down the winch cable all afternoon to slit throats and then dress beef. Along with Blue, they had taken 10 head from the feral domestic cattle herd before it got too dark to continue their hunt. They were plenty tired by then anyway and didn't begrudge the opportunity to retire when it came. Now that Jim owned the Black Hole, there would always be other days for them to shoot more food. As he scrubbed his armor, Critias watched Carmen teach Alice how to perform a ballet pirouette. Alice didn't think of it as play since her intention was to call it martial training. As her new fighting coach, Verloc had told Alice that strength, balance, and endurance were essential to the combative arts. Alice saw their dance practice as a way to take her there. Critias didn't disagree, since a lack of balance was surely a disastrous flaw in a warrior. Carmen considered it fun time that she could spend with her daughter. No one could fail to see that Alice wasn't much of a dancer, especially when Carmen was beside her. Carmen could perform entire famous ballets more than flawlessly. Only Verloc could hope to match Carmen's graceful superhuman strength, infallible balance, and immunity to fatigue. Carmen had the talent to dance a ballet, recite the histories of Suetonius, and shoot birds from the air with her pistol, all at the same time. Their splendid party stopped abruptly when a knock came upon the exterior door. They didn't have anyone outside on patrol or otherwise. The general reaction was to worry that a ghoul had tried to break in, which made all of them reach for their weapons. A moment longer than it had taken for them to arm themselves, people realized that ghouls didn't politely knock on the door. Mindful that Jeremy had been thinking the same thing just before Jingle Bells killed him, Critias went over to the door with his pistol still at the ready.
Who is it?
Special Agent Shield and Dr. Cornelius Kine.
Romeo introduced his mistress and the scientist they had visited.
May we come in?
Critias opened the door. Dr. Kine carried a sack of oranges in one arm and a sack of assorted vegetables in the other.
The shower's over there.
Critias pointed the way. He also showed them the plastic tubs beside the door for them to put their contaminated outside shoes in. There was a bag of shower sandals they could wear.
We just came from a hot shower.
Romeo explained why his hair was still wet.
Dr. Kane was kind enough to provide us with a fresh change of clothes as well.
They did accept the opportunity to put aside their dirty footwear. As Dr. Kine entered, he told Critias,
"Their treatments went perfectly. Your friend, that Kevin fellow, told me that we would confirm the findings when they returned home.
As Critias took the grocery bags from Kine so that the doctor could kick off his shoes, he told them,
"We have dinner going if any of you are hungry."
While Critias headed toward the grill area, he suggested to Kine,
"Let me introduce you to Werner Hindemith, Ph.D. He does aerospace engineering, among other things. I'm sure he would be interested in learning more about your discoveries. You should ask him about his new electromagnetism flying machine."
That was music to Kine's ears. The only thing he loved more than working on his research was getting to talk about it with someone who could understand him. After Critias put the bags on the table near the grill, he told Hiram,
"Dr. Kine used neutrons to burn the infectiousness out of Verloc and Romeo. There is nothing to worry about."
Hiram replied,
For now, it is best if people use the same precautions that they did before. Let's not advise laxity about contamination safety while having dinner in the field.
He checked the grocery bags and then pulled out some onions and green peppers with a sigh of pleasure. As he sliced them up, Hiram scattered them on the griddle side of his camping stove. When the aroma of grilled onions and peppers reached his nostrils, Hiram told Critias,
This day seems to just keep getting better.
An electronic whirring of vibration came from Hiram's pocket. It was his newly functional cell phone. He answered it, said little, and then agreed to something before he put it away.
There is news going on at home.
He told Critias.
Jim wants a video conference.
Critias didn't know how to go about that for a host of reasons.
"How do we do that?"
Hiram pointed to his pack with his knife.
Get my laptop?
Critias retrieved the small personal computer and then set it up on the table. They had an extension cord that came from Carmen's portable generator outlets. Critias plugged it in there. After Hiram turned it on, the computer connected to the newly operational wireless network router that linked to the equipment they had installed in the nearby air traffic control tower. Once it warmed up, Hiram made a few quick selections, and then the device's flip-up screen showed a view of the captain's table back in the city. They had already finished dinner back home, since it was well into the evening. The cookout at the East Airport hadn't even started until after it was fully dark. That precaution ensured that the smoke wouldn't draw any infected attention. Jim was at the table with some of the captains, Jack, and a few others. Hiram's computer had its own camera that allowed Jim to see them back on a video screen at his end, from its perspective. Jessica went over to stand next to her father and then say hello to Jim. Nadia appeared on their end to say hello to Hiram. An exchange of small pleasantries carried on, and then Jim addressed the matters of business. Kevin's software quartered the screen space on Hiram's laptop computer into 4 equally sized squares. Each one displayed a different incoming camera at the same time. Yet another delegation of unhappy workers bent Jim's ear with their complaints about the inequities of his society. To Critias, it seemed as though Keith's revolutionary tirade had already started to spread like a disease.
Now that we are all here,
Jim said to the half-dozen petitioners.
Please begin.
The leader of the complainers' delegation was a woman by the name of Liz for Elizabeth. She was a citizen of long standing, much as Keith had asserted himself to be. Also, like Keith, Liz worked in the civilian armory. Her typical occupation was as the shooting instructor and sometime manager of the target range that was somewhere in the basement levels of King's Tower. The people in combative professions like the G&P and the foragers invariably already knew how to shoot straight as a prerequisite skill to hold such positions. Critias had never even seen the target range, but he did appreciate that a lot of effort went into preparing regular people to carry their pistols and know how to use them safely. The Denver women in particular still worked to develop their handgun skills. That alone assured that Liz kept busy. Her department also did a lot of reloading, because they made their own practice wadcutter pistol ammunition for their shooting range. It was partly because they accumulated all the spent brass. Foragers used up a lot of pistol ammunition too, especially from the machine pistols that most of them carried and used extensively, but their ammo was always the low-penetration subsonic hollow points, and their brass ended up abandoned on the ground. Their occupational risks precluded such tedious considerations as saving the brass from their cartridges. Liz's armory warehoused thousands of extra weapons no one really needed on a regular basis, and they did everything else weapon-related that didn't fall under the specific interests of either the G&P or forager armories. Those two departments didn't bother with anything that didn't directly relate to the specific needs of their members. Unlike civilian weapons that never went outside, the other two armories had dedicated decontamination personnel to collect service weapons, and they had the gunsmiths to make suppressors or customized firearms. As Deputy Grand Marshal, Hiram was the command officer that the whole department officially reported to. From Hiram, issues might move upward to Fat Jack and then to Jim, if for some reason he could not handle it himself. Liz told Hiram,
"We took a vote and we don't want Keith anymore."
She summoned someone from off-camera. The man who arrived was one of Bors's recently arrived companions, his close friend, the Muscovite.
"We want Oleg to replace Keith.
Liz told Hiram.
He is one of the best gunsmiths I've ever seen. There was a replacement part he needed for a foreign weapon, but we didn't have it. Oleg used our shop to make himself one from scratch."
Hiram asked.
How many of you want Oleg to run your shop?
All of them raised their hand while one of them called out.
We are sick of Keith's complaining too.
Another seconded that.
He's a dick.
Hiram asked.
Where is Keith now?
An expression of validation came onto Liz's face.
"Keith is sulking in his apartment. He bought a bottle of whiskey with the coins we got recently and was already drunk by the end of supper. He lost the rest of his money playing dice with Gloria. After that, he had a tantrum and then went home to cry about it."
Henry and Gloria were still at the table. Both of them wore amused expressions as they saw them back by camera. Gloria waved.
"Hey, Critias."
Critias asked her.
You cleaned out Keith?
"You know what they say?
She answered with a grin.
You don't play dice against a forager driver and you don't mess around with Jim."
The sing-song she lent to the last part came from the lyric of the Jim Croce song. After she overheard the situation, Carmen started to sing from further off in the hangar. Her song was something about the south side of Chicago being the baddest part of that town. Critias didn't know any different. He thought she meant when the ghouls in that city destroyed the reclamation center. In part, Carmen did, but she had a penchant for multi-level humor. Hiram told Liz,
I'm not going to do anything until he is here to speak for himself. If I was going to relieve the man from his post, it would be to his face.
Jim told Hatchet,
Send some GNP to bring him down here. If he doesn't want to come, tell them to carry him.
Since the meeting was on hold, Jack told Critias,
That was a fine bit of hunting that you and Blue did today. Everyone is grateful.
He had an amusing thought.
Everyone but Emperor Nick. He complained that you didn't save the brains and the kidneys.
The brains were on the ground.
Critias replied.
I'd rather go out and shoot more cows than make people eat kidneys.
Nick listened from off camera. He called out,
Kidneys make a delicious and hearty meal. You throw away one more kidney and the Emperor of Kitchens will have you raped by baboons.
Hiram inquired.
How are the new survivors doing?
Ecstatic.
Jim reported.
They are happy to see new faces. The last I heard, they were throwing themselves a welcome home party at the pool, and I thought we spent too much time underground.
Keith's apartment was one floor up from Funland. It didn't take the G&P long to bring him down for the meeting. Keith looked as drunk as he was, and he also felt plenty miserable over having gambled away his recently acquired fortune. If he lost his job in the next few minutes, he was really going to have reason to shed tears. As soon as he was before the camera, and at least partially aware through his drunkenness, Hiram told him,
Keith, I am removing you from your position.
That sobered him up nicely as his face took on a shriek worthy of a ghoul.
What?
You are fired.
Hiram said more slowly. He wailed.
Why? What did I do?
Insubordination to your superior officers comes to mind.
Hiram began.
The exact reason is because the people in your department have requested that you be replaced by the person they would prefer to work with. I didn't know anything about it until they came to me to tell me about their decision.
He blubbered.
Replaced by whom?
Bors's man Oleg.
Hiram divulged.
According to your own people, he knows a lot more about guns than you do. The good news is that you wanted to see people vote in an election. The bad news is that you lost.
Keith turned to Jim for some kind of explanation that would hopefully reverse the decision.
You gave my job to a pirate?
Don't look at me.
Jim told him.
You know my policy is not to interfere in other people's chains of command. As Deputy Grand Marshal, you answer to Colonel Davis. Now, if the captains all line up and decide they can't tolerate him, Jack can consider replacing him. It would be a great loss to me if that were to happen. Though I think Colonel Davis wouldn't mind all that much, since I would immediately make him a captain among the foragers commanding his own Gravewalkers, which is pretty much what he does anyway. All he seems to get from his current post is a lot of extra work and headaches, like having to fire you because you alienated all your own people. I have to assume your current disheveled state was also a factor. You seem to be falling apart before it came to this.
It's not all that bad.
Hiram told Jim.
I have a lot fewer problems here than I ever did in the U.S. Army. You don't promote all the politically proficient incompetents like they tended to do.
Jim's paymaster Julia was at the table, and she took that opportunity to speak up.
Keith, you will need to vacate the residence of the department head. You can put most of your stuff in storage while you move into the men's barracks.
Keith gasped.
You are giving away my apartment?
He nearly gagged on the words.
Of course not.
Julia said peaceably.
It isn't mine in any sense. That is Oleg's apartment now as the new department head of the civilian armory. He is entitled to private quarters the same as you were.
Jim told him.
The barracks are not all that bad. You can make some new friends and the beds are comfortable. We collect only the finest luxury mattresses. I remember when you had to sleep in a rope hammock that dangled from the roof of the castle.
Keith squealed.
We did that in case the ghouls broke in.
That was in the time of Jim's father, when the whole community lived in Forager's Castle as their only property. Those were hard times compared to the relative peace and comfort people had grown accustomed to since Jim moved the community downtown. Oleg told Keith in thick English,
"No need to hurry. I can't wait to move in tomorrow."
That was enough to make Keith snap. He turned on Oleg to curse him.
I'm not giving my apartment to a filthy scum-sucking pirate.
Oleg had better self-control, only not by much. He stepped into Keith's face, about to beat the man senseless.
"Say that again,"
he challenged in a low growl. Oleg had killed men for less. Where he came from, someone had to die after a provocation like that. He was not a pirate among pirates anymore, so Oleg remained more civilized. To defuse the situation, Jim said,
"From that I can assume that Oleg is not about to offer you a job in his department. As of this moment, you are going to decontamination services. They sent me a request for some new entry-level people. You will be a laborer that loads undead bodies and contaminated trash into containers for proper disposal."
Keith's life crumbled down around him so fast that he could barely believe he was awake and not in a nightmare. He complained,
"Picking up bodies is work for your slaves."
"They are my condemned prisoners that I force to work if they want to eat,"
Jim clarified.
"They do whatever I say they do as the need arises. Yes, I had them cleaning up bodies in the light trail tunnels. That is not slave work. It is high-risk decontamination work, and we do it all the time. How do you think we recently got all those bodies out of the tower basement, lobby, and the barrier yard? Boers already took his people in to start cleaning up the jailhouse. Hazard duty pays well, and I hear you could use the coinage. Personally, I would think that someone who trusted in their luck as little as you do would avoid gambling your life away."
You force me to work if I want to eat.
Keith whined.
You make me do whatever you say I should do. What is the difference between me and a condemned prisoner?
Gloria jibed.
The condemned prisoners have jobs and a place to sleep.
Many people laughed at Keith's expense. Jim told Keith,
"The difference is that you can have any job in the city, including mine, if you could demonstrate your ability to perform those services on demand. If you have a talent that I don't know about, tell me. Colonel Davis has a whole contingent of people at the East Airport right now. If you would like to start working out there, I'm sure I can find you something in the decontamination arena. I may even be able to get the mechanics to take you on. They could keep you busy grinding or carrying materials. If you want to avoid danger, if at all possible, you can work in housekeeping. There will be a lot of work coming up moving supplies around. You have record keeping and warehouse experience. You might even be valuable there."
You are all in this against me.
Keith grumbled.
This is you making an example out of me so that everyone else learns not to complain about working as slaves just to eat. It won't be long before I turn up dead. Why don't you just kill me now and spare everyone the mystery you obviously won't bother solving?
"I can't give you an important job,"
Jim told Keith in plain honesty.
"You are cracking up under pressure right now, and you have not seen any real pressure. I can only assume that when you found yourself in real danger, you would be worse than this. The more shit you talk, I'm not sure anyone will take you on at this point because they don't want to inherit the problem of your mouth and your attitude. Until you get yourself cleaned up, you are going to be working in ways that only endanger yourself. I won't let you take other people down with you. I have no choice but to make you work. If I don't, someone else will kill you. They are not going to tolerate you being a slacker while they carry their weight around here."
More than a few people in the crowd voiced their support on that issue. Keith was going to work like everyone else, no matter how low the job was or how much he hated it. Keith had a challenge.
If you could name these jobs I could have if you didn't hate me, I will shut up and prove to you I can be more than a peon around here. You think I have never shot a ghoul?
Jim took up the gauntlet.
"I have 2 important jobs you could take on if you are man enough for them. One new opening that has just come up is that we need a permanent crew for the Black Hole. As our new supply of beef can amply attest, the value of the Black Hole to us is nearly immeasurable. Because it is so valuable, the ship requires a crew of the strictest professionalism, people who are willing to study and train, so that they know everything there is to know about that craft. The dirigible will always be under the supervisory command of one of the captains, but one of them won't always be aboard. The other new job we are accepting volunteers for is a high-risk decontamination team that will operate a dry ice pressure blaster. Think of it as a sand blaster only without any sand. The dry ice will turn into a gas after being the abrasive. That gas can be lethal without the proper precautions. Infected material it will be blasting off of floors, walls, and equipment will also be hazardous. It is so dangerous that the operators will have to have special medical inspections to determine if they caught the infection without having any outward signs of injury. Once again, this new team requires consummate professionals who will never make even the smallest mistakes. Never even once has anyone told you that you don't do your job. You always show up and you always produce what you say you will. What you don't offer me is the ability to provide that in a way where other people trust you when there is risk involved."
Keith said,
"Give me a place on the Black Hole."
Jim shook his head no in disappointment.
"That was the wrong answer. You don't qualify for that position and you know it."
Though he already guessed, Keith inquired,
"Where does this ice blasting job start? Is this for the jailhouse?"
When Jim nodded that it was, Keith declared,
If you are saying that this job isn't suicide, that if I follow proper procedures and do it right, that I have nothing to worry about but my own mistakes, then I'll do it on the condition it is me proving myself and not a permanent position.
That job is an opportunity for you to prove yourself.
Jim didn't offer conditions.
Take it or leave it. You can always haul bodies. Personally, I don't consider that dramatically safer.
I'll take it.
Keith accepted the offer. He would endure the risk to restore his position in the community.
You will start morning shift tomorrow.
Jim closed the matter.
It will be a team of people. Since you have some leadership experience, you will be in charge of the crew.
With that out of the way, Jim talked to Hiram on the monitor.
Colonel Davis, do you have everything you need to make it through the night? Fleet Admiral Rudel confirmed his arrival for tomorrow morning. He wants to be on the ground just about sunrise when there is enough light for him to see runway.
I have a lot of experienced field people out here.
Hiram answered with confidence for their safety.
I will have the guards check in hourly to report our status.
Hiram had good cause to feel secure. Even if there was a ghoul attack in the night, he had a small army of heavy hitters available to deal with it. He had Verloc, Carmen, and Critias, along with his Gravewalkers, the Forager crews, and the Starlight Squad. That was plenty of firepower for him to handle any confrontation. Hiram felt his situation was as safe as things could be under his present circumstances.
I'll leave this on for a while,
Jim told him.
I will want to talk to Jessica later, and I'm sure there are others who have people they would like to speak to.
Since it seemed that the business was over, Yeti went up there to tell Jim,
On behalf of my squad, I'd like to say thanks for the basket. We are all really enjoying it.
I'm glad.
Jim responded.
That was my intention.
Critias went off to finish cleaning his armor, and once he had that done, he went to take a cold rainwater shower. When he came out, Carmen waited for him because she had their supper arranged. He dressed in the spare clothes that Carmen had brought back from her trip to the city, and then Critias went to the table she had set. Verloc, Romeo, and Alice joined them for dinner. Carmen had prepared him a plate with a steak, a little lobster that she had finagled out of the Starlight Squad, and a bowl with oranges she had already peeled and sectioned for him. As Critias ate some oranges with his fork, he noticed that Verloc seemed a little ill over the idea of eating. He asked,
Not feeling well?
I'm a little queasy.
Verloc admitted.
Dr. Kine said I could expect that for the first day or two. It passes quickly.
You will be able to eat with everyone else in Funland now?
Critias gave her something positive to think about while she was ill. That did make Verloc smile.
I'm looking forward to that. I was beginning to feel a bit like a leper.
She shrugged.
I suppose I was, when you think about it. That's the past.
She took up her cup of red drink from instant powder and water.
Here's to good friends, hard work, and the rewards that come from them.
They all drank to that toast and then ate their supper. Alice asked,
Will I get a chance to stand guard duty tonight?
Only if you want to stand watch with someone else.
Critias told her.
You are too young to kill for falling asleep. That means you are still too young for the responsibility.
I will help someone with theirs then,
she said passively.
I could save someone's life if they happen to nod off. Everyone here has been up as long as we have. I'm sure they will be tired.
After a long pause, she asked something else.
Are we going to open his prison box tonight?
Critias had forgotten about the president.
Yes, I will get around to that. There will be too much going on tomorrow. That reminds me, Jim wants to impress Fleet Admiral Rudel that we are stronger and more organized than he is. You need to look extra professional, with yes, sir, no, sir, please, and thank you. Stand up straight and keep your mouth shut unless you have something worth saying. You, especially. For him to see a young woman like yourself with your equipment and the right attitude, he will already be trying to figure out how excellent the veterans are if you are so impressive.
Yes, sir.
She sounded genuine rather than testing the routine. Critias studied her curiously to figure out if she would need to act or if she was already impressive for her age. He went back to his meal suspecting it was the latter.
I think you should sterilize him.
Carmen meant using the neutrons on the president. Critias liked the idea, but he wasn't sure that Kine would want to participate.
He probably wouldn't go for it.
Carmen turned away from the table toward where Kine and Vern discussed her broadcast power portable generator. They talked about how it functioned and if they could construct a large-scale one.
Dr. Kine,
she asked,
would you neutron wash an evil watcher criminal for us? We would like to make him safe to handle while we punish him for his many atrocities. He murdered and then cannibalized a large number of SEED survivors in Denver. That made us pretty angry with him.
Dr. Kine answered,
I was hoping that you would ask for my assistance. I am interested in examining him to see what else I might learn about the enhanced condition that you call being a watcher. I still have my doubts about this severe neurosis that all of them are supposed to develop. All the ones I have met so far seem to function within socially acceptable parameters.
You're in for a treat then,
Critias said without looking up from his delicious steak.
This one has a real charming personality. The sickening filth that comes out of his mouth is enough to make you want to cry.
Carmen abruptly stood up to make an urgent announcement to the whole room.
Sally Headshot's water has just broken. She is going into labor.
Her tone was entirely positive, which implied there were no expected complications since she would have already heard about it from Kevin. Everyone raised a cup to celebrate the good news. Some people wagered coins on whether Fat Jack was going to be the father of a boy or a girl. Hiram came by their table to tell Critias,
This day just keeps getting better. I want you to get 5 hours of sleep tonight. You need to be sharp tomorrow for when Rudel shows up. My people look pretty good, but you look better. Your job will be to outshine the talent he brings. We can be sure they will be some ace operators.
He glanced at Carmen and thought about what a temptation she was.
That is 5 hours of sleep.
He told Critias again.
And that's an order.
I need to go out for a bit with Dr. Kine.
He informed Hiram.
We won't be out for very long. Just a trip to the air tower to take care of the president.
That was the one good reason to win support from Hiram.
You may need time to do it right, so eat up.
He checked his watch.
You only have a couple hours or so to spare.
Alice wanted to go. She approached it delicately by asking,
Who are you taking with you?
Eat up and get your gear on.
Critias told her.
Going for a walk out among the angry meat will do you some good. It will never get this easy again.